All right.
Welcome to Bitcoin Liberty Live, episode 10. We're sorting out our video technologies here. I think we got a good dialed-in system now between our audio and video.
Well, we'll see. We just did a test recording. It's like all you see is like these two monkeys just like poking at the screen. And
This is good. I think we're rolling. Yeah. The last one we did, it looked like you said it was filmed on a potato, and I don't disagree. It was kind of green. My laptop camera it messes with things. We're using Riverside FM now, and it's recording on my camera on the phone pretty well, I think. So
yeah, we just did a test recording. It looked pretty good. We'll see how these mics hold up.
Episode 10.
We'll invest in some equipment.
I know.
Yeah.
We're gonna build some momentum here, and when we get to a point where we're really rolling, we'll get it. We'll have a couple of nice boom mics and who knows what camera.
Comfy chairs.
Yeah.
We'll actually get a stand for our props.
Yeah, I know. We'll figure it out. But we're doing it.
Yeah. Rocking and rolling.
Did you see the big game Friday? Or what? No, what day was it? Thursday? The big game.
Sports ball?
There were two teams fighting over a football. They talked about golf. And they argued back and forth about all kinds of stuff. There were some refs asking questions. And
I saw the Kennedy version of it.
I haven't seen that one. But so what did he do? Did he take that and add his own, or did he just do his own?
Well, no, it was kind of a clunky setup. Like, I was sort of curious how they're going to pull the whole thing off, but it was like they had the debate like on a screen with the two candidates, and then they would like pause and cut to Kennedy and give him the same question. The thing is, the moderator was like, like lock on, like that's 2 minutes, you're cut off, and like even the moderator in the middle of the thing said they're telling me in my ear to give you some more time. But you guys said to cut you off at 2 minutes, so I'm cutting you off at 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so Kennedy kept getting, like he'd probably have 10 seconds left on whatever point he was making, but he would just chink, they'd cut him off anyway.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he actually had, they weren't, like, I don't think there's anybody gets in that office that's going to, like, fix anything, because they can't. It's a structure, right?
Yeah, it's a whole mechanism that they're inserting themselves into, and they have to like unwind stuff and set things up. And how long does that take?
Forever.
Yeah,
So it kind of doesn't matter what he said. Ultimately, the thing is he's so cut out of the debates right now. Like he's just And
you liked what Kennedy said, and as a candidate, Kennedy is still like he would be.
Well, he's a viable candidate. I mean, he's an actual, like, thoughtful human being. Like, these two guys, I think it was Peter St. Onge, Professor St. Onge, Prof. St. Onge, however you want to call him. He said he did a study, and he put inaugural addresses for the last 100 years through a Fleisch-Kincaid scoring algorithm. Fleisch-Kincaid is the thing that tells you what reading level this particular text is.
Yeah.
He said you could go back to like 1910 or 1900 and you look at the inaugural address, and that was at the 13th to 14th grade level. So you're talking like freshman, sophomore in college.
Yeah.
That's the reading comprehension level of the address. And his point is the people that are writing this are writing for the average Joe. They're writing for the middle of the pack.
Right.
And the middle of the pack in 1900, before state-run schools and before all this Department of Education and all this administrative state nonsense, was at the college level. People learning how to read a Bible by candlelight, essentially. Today, like Obama's inaugural address, he said was around the 8th or 9th grade level.
Yeah, I heard that.
And then Trump and Biden are down to like the 4th grade level.
I know, it's gotten sad, but like you read the Emancipation Proclamation, and I gotta think, and I'm reading, and it's like a college written essay.
Correct. Yeah.
And the vocabulary and the words, you're like, these are people way back then. Like the education was different.
Yeah.
And not even all that consistent or pervasive, but they were presenting, and that drew crowds, and it's like a moment in history. It was moving people. It meant something to people. They knew it.
Right.
And anymore, it's just kind of like, whoa. Don't get too complicated with your words here. You actually sound too smart.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a problem now.
Yeah.
But I watched those little parts, like they're bickering about golf and all this shit, and I'm just going, what on earth?
When they hit the golf part, for me, I personally, I get it. I relate to it. It was kind of funny. But for the general audience, it kind of turned this corner where I'm like, oh my goodness, how many people are going to care or relate to this?
Yeah.
Golf? I don't know.
It was literally like being on a golf course in Palm Beach, and two guys with like beanie caps on there going, "This is my golf course. No, you took too many shots."
They were talking about handicaps and like having a caddy or carrying your own bag, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
I don't think general folks. Basically, all of a sudden you seem elitist.
Yeah.
Presidents go play golf. It must be nice.
Right. Yeah. Well, but the whole time it's like Trump's just doing what Trump does. Mm-hmm. Like zero change from the last time he was up there. He just blusters through shit. He just says a bunch of shit. He doesn't make it up on the fly. He doesn't care.
And for Trump, he was pretty measured.
He was measured by his previous standards.
Yeah.
100%. And Biden is literally just sitting there gaslighting. Like, I've never heard someone just outright lying about stuff.
Well, he brought up the both sides, decent people on both sides hoax. And it's like, really? We're back to that again? Just outright throwing out these old debunked
Falsehood.
Tropes.
Yeah. Like,
these old
lies.
tropes. And so if you're in that one contingent of, like, you're already voting that way anyway, okay, it just reinforces that. For a lot of people, it's like, really?
Yeah.
You're bringing that up again?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a healthy chunk of the population doesn't know any better, And that was one of the cool things that Peter St. Onge said on that interview I saw today was, there's 60% of the people, they're literal NPCs. They just get their information from watching CNN at night or the local news or something like that. They still watch TV, which I can't even fathom.
Yeah.
And for them, they hear that and they just go, "Oh, okay, that's probably what it is. I don't know," and they don't give it any thought beyond that, No. So they end up with this really distorted worldview. And the thing is, if you're like a left coaster or a right coaster and you got a pretty high-paying job and inflation isn't really kicking you in the balls that bad, like, you can kind of get by and none of this stuff really bothers you. Like, I just went to the grocery store this morning and I bought some steaks and, I'm like full-on Bitcoin diet, like steaks, butter, eggs, and some nut milk, I think. And
that's good.
Yeah, all healthy stuff, but it was like $200. It's like a week's worth of food.
Wow.
And I can look at it and I go, I know for a fact that this just 4 years ago was about $60 worth of food. Mm-hmm. Like it's not surprising to me, and yet I command sufficient slave wages that it doesn't meaningfully impact my bottom line. Mm-hmm. Like, it means I'll buy a little less Bitcoin this month. That's it. Like, there's no, like, I'm not going, I got to choose between gas and food this week, or I got to choose between beans and steak. It's just like, I'm just getting steak. I don't care.
Yeah, and you're buying quality food where if you're budget cutting and trying to get, food on the cheap, you're falling into that fiat food, you can get cheaper stuff that's garbage.
Yeah, right. And so, but it's noticeable. Mm-hmm. And some kid posted a thing on Twitter where he said it was a Walmart shopping cart, and he had placed an order back in like 2022 or something.
It had like doubled. Or
yeah,
something.
well, he just said reorder all, and it was like triple. Because it was like, I think his bill at that time was like $67 or $85 or something like that. And he's like, $215. Like, how?
Yeah.
How is this,
Exactly.
And Biden just literally got up there and was like, that's not happening. Like, what are you talking about, man? Like, how can you?
That's not happening.
Yeah.
That's a lie. Everything he said is a lie.
Yeah.
It's like, so Trump kept going back to the immigration and the border crisis and all that, which I get. And Biden was talking about, doing all this stuff, which was scattered and nonsensical at times. And all I could think in my head is what they're not getting to ultimately is the money.
Right.
It's the money.
Yeah, always.
Who is paying for this? How are you doing this? And effectively, I mean, you can make these promises or you can do this stuff. And with what money? You can talk about reining in these wars or having perpetual war for perpetual nonsense. Where's this money coming from?
Right. Well,
it's money. They didn't get into the money problem. I mean, I think Trump kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
But on the Democrat side, it's like, well, we need to both pay for all this and invest in all this.
Right.
And there's no question of like where this money comes from
at all.
Trump gets into the money and the just sort of the conservative sort of business view on how you budget and spend money.
Right.
But ultimately, it wasn't said in the debate. I mean, Trump's touched upon crypto and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But everything for me, it just goes back to who is paying for this? Where's this money coming from?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no one wants to answer that question, and that's part of the reason I'm writing this dang book. Is the amount of complexity that we have, like, because I see people, and they're people I respect, that go, we just need to get rid of the administrative state. Just get rid of the FBI and the DEA and this and that. And, just get rid of all these three-letter agencies and get rid of the Fed and get rid of this and get rid of this, and then everything will fix itself. And I go, well, and I'm thinking to myself, all that stuff cropped up for a reason. And yes, some of the reasons were terrible and based in socialism and communism and that sort of struggle that we've got going on in the world right still. And they're also based on free market principles, and they're also based on capitalist principles, and they're also based on, and there's this like constant tug of war. And the big ideas are easy. It's when you get to where the big ideas meet that it gets really, really sticky, So I agree with you 100%. Like, I think if you fix the rule set, then the amount of stickiness in between starts to dissipate because you just don't have the option anymore. And I think you have to take that option for compromise away almost, And if you make it so people just can't steal money, then all of a sudden they have to recalibrate the way they do business.
Yeah, if the money and the systems were starting to get fixed, the debate collaterally would just be a different conversation because the mindset and the awareness would be different itself. Instead of presuming, like, well, we can always just pay for stuff, so then what are we paying for?
Right.
And we're not going to disagree over, oh, yeah, money here or money there. It's more like, how and why does this even happen at all?
Right. Well, right now it's like if you and I shared a credit card and you really want to build a pool and I really want to build a new deck and we're arguing about which one to do it, and neither one of us has a job. Like you kind of go, the conversation, we get in these deep debates about, well, the pool's going to be better because of all these reasons, and the kids can swim, and we can relax by the pool. And I go, the deck is way better because we can have a barbecue, and we can invite guests over, and yada, yada, yada. And somewhere in the middle of it, there's some third party looking at it going, I have to pay this credit card bill, assholes.
Yeah.
You guys shouldn't be talking about a pool or a deck.
Well,
you're not talking about getting a job.
Yeah, well, and all the kids sitting listening to the parents argue, the parents aren't telling the kids, oh, by the way, we're going to take out another credit card to pay off the interest on our other credit card to keep doing this bullshit.
Right.
As we argue about it.
Right.
And the kids are like, wait, do we have any money?
No.
Does the family even have any money? The kids don't even know that we don't have money.
Right. Well, they do now. They're walking around going like, hey, while you guys are arguing about whether we should get a pool or a deck, I need some new shoes, and I haven't had new underwear in 6 years. And the parents are like, yeah, that's a you problem. We need to send Timmy down the street some new underwear and some new shoes because his family's really poor. And, for the kids sitting there listening to that, they're just going, and I think that's all of America right now. They're sitting there going, hey, man, why are we don't have any money. We're broke. Yeah. You guys keep talking. And yet somehow Lockheed Martin gets all this money. Ukraine's getting all this money. Israel's getting money.
Yep.
These people are getting money. Everybody but us is getting money. People coming into this country illegally are getting just rafts of handouts, staying in luxury hotels, to Trump's point. And meanwhile, we got people out here on the street dying of fentanyl overdoses and can't get mental health care. And it's just...
They sort of touched on that as well, but it's such a deep, bad problem that it was like, wow, I heard no solution there.
Yeah, well, there's no solutions anywhere.
Right? And the parents are like, kids, I have a 5-point plan, multi-phased, where we are going to double the ply of your underwear and toilet paper.
Right.
And I'm gonna increase your allowance, and you'll have half the chores you had to do before.
Right.
And the kids are like, okay, sounds great.
Right.
And then they build the new deck, or they build the new pool, or they do both, and the kids are like, wait a second.
I still have the old underwear. You just added a new layer.
Underwear. Yeah.
The elastic shot. What's going on here?
It's ridiculous. It was cringeworthy, and I had to watch it. I mean, I almost didn't watch it, but then I'm like, you know what? I hate to say I went into it thinking this is going to be funny. And, well, so here, from my standpoint, I'm like, I know that Biden is in serious mental decline.
Well, yeah.
Sadly,
There's
naturally,
not a person
I don't judge it. He's
Earth.
old.
Right.
He's a human.
Well.
And the fact that they're... okay, well, maybe he's not. The fact that... the fact that he's being propped up and held up and walked on and off the stage, for me, it's like, what is this show? What is this strategic, thought process? So it's going to be entertaining from that regard. Like, wow, can Biden, are his meds going to kick in for that hour and a half span of time that he can deliver in a way that people thought he behaved in?
I think they gave him an injectable. I swear to God. Like, I think they gave him, like, a little diabetes, like, slow-release mechanism.
He probably had a patch on that was, like, keeping him...
Yeah, well, it's just, like, every 5 or 10 minutes, they give him a new shot of, like, Adderall or whatever it is they got to keep his motor moving. And even that...
Going into it, I knew it was going to be a shit show and that he'd struggle. And I was kind of expecting these pauses and open mouth gapped, like, deer in the headlights fear look.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, there it was. And I was like, how did we not expect that? And why would they throw him in there, or even at his behest say, he'd be like, I'm fine. It's like, no, you're not.
Right.
It's too far gone now. Well, they did it. So when it happened, I was just like, oh my goodness. At another level for me, I had a friend talking to me about, so he's got some Trump derangement syndrome going on. And in my mind, it's like, we've known Biden can barely keep his faculties together now,
right.
And yet we're going through this. This funny, like, mainstream legacy media propaganda center is sort of like, it looks like a psyop to me, where it's like, wow, we all suddenly realize that Biden may have a problem.
Right.
It's like, did we not know this for at least a year or so already? Like, we knew, but the narrative has suddenly changed.
Right.
So what's the new plan at a level where I'm at with it all when I think about it? This is my little conspiracy monkey thing. The system's broken. It's the money, but it's everything going on around that. It's broken. It's going to collapse. They know it's going to collapse. It's a matter of timing. So I told my buddy, I was like, they're running to lose. They're running to lose. Say Trump wins, whatever. Give it to Trump. They're setting him up. He's already like a felon, and he's all this badness. You all knew that. We're trying to tell you that. Do you not understand that? He's a bad guy.
Right.
They run to lose. Trump gets the torch, starts trying to do whatever he can, as anyone could, the most genius person could try to do. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It fails. It all collapses naturally. They blame it on Trump.
Yeah.
Trump's holding the bag. And they can. All they have to do, it's the easier operation, is to say, well, we tried to warn you.
Yep.
Trump, see, it's Trump. It was Trump. It's those greedy corporations. It's those greedy rich people. It's Trump himself. He's this greedy alley cat guy.
Right. Well, but they did the same thing in the reverse in 2008. Like, George Bush came in. He was the one that, like, oversaw the collapse of the entire global financial system. He was the one that orchestrated, like, hey, let's bail out the rich people. Let's shoot $1 trillion cannon at this problem. That should be fine. And then Obama got to pick up the pieces. And they go, this is Obama's fault. Look at the Obama economy and all this shit. And it's just like, you guys made the mess. And now you're trying to assign blame on this guy. But that's the circle, right? Like,
and Obama did roll with that and basically appointed, Goldman Sachs in charge of stuff. And that whole bailout process under Obama was its own thing. But
well, it was all initiated under the Bush administration, right? Like, that all came from Bush. The whole reason that we needed all those bailouts is because Bush decided to go dump $4 trillion into Afghanistan and Iraq and all this kind of stuff. And you go, what was the point of all that? Nothing. Zero. It was pointless.
Sure.
It made the defense contractors a truck ton of money. It made Halliburton a truck ton of money. It made Dick Cheney a truck ton of money. It made all Bush's buddies a truck ton of money. But we all got hosed. I mean, we got screwed bad. And so then to try and you go, well, we've already initiated this fix, and then go, now it's your problem, dude. Mm-hmm. And so he has the option now of going, all right, I'm going to unwind your fix. I'm going to make everything substantially worse. I'm going to guarantee that I don't get reelected, but I'm going to do the right thing and fix this mess. There's zero incentive to do that. The overwhelming incentive is to go, well, that's what they started. I'm just going to kick that can till the end of my term, and then let the next asshole deal with it. And then the next asshole came in and he got his own calamity, and he blew that up. I mean, he oversaw the biggest the complete suspension of the Constitution in the United States of America was presided over by Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And you can call it Trump derangement syndrome or whatever you want. I go, that guy shut down our economy. He signed off on this idea. And you can say, well, he didn't know any better. He had experts, this, that, the other thing.
He brought in Fauci and then just sort of went with that.
Right. Which may or may not have been the smart thing to do. I mean, I can't, if I'm sitting there in the presidency and, you can look at Sweden. They got like all of 14 people in the whole country. And they go, we're not locking down. And they were fine. And I think the United States probably could have done the same thing. And that would have been just absolute red meat for the Democrats to just launch into them and say, look at the death toll, and it wouldn't have mattered. Sure. Like there's just no way to politically navigate either one of those things and come out without the other side taking advantage of it. So I think you're 100% right. They're gonna there's no other trajectory. Trump started the big inflationary mess, and he's blaming Biden. Oh, this is Biden inflation. You're the one that pumped all this money in the economy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he came along and just kept kicking the same can you kicked to start with. But you can't blame this guy for all the inflation you created. Yeah. And people like Republicans can't hear that.
I can imagine Trump, in hindsight now thinking, man, I would have done a lot of things differently. And with the second term, he probably would have he wouldn't have gone the route we went.
Maybe.
Who knows? Hard to imagine. I think now that we've been through it and going into it again, there's a couple of approaches to that kind of a problem now where Trump, I think, has learned, how that went versus how we maybe could better handle it with the Biden administration. I couldn't guarantee they go back to, giving us weekly dictates on mask wearing and who knows what. So.
Well, the craziest part about it is the Obama administration came up with a pandemic preparedness plan. And they had a very detailed outline of like the messaging and what sort of steps you should take, and the Trump administration just threw all of that out. Just said we're not following any of this, despite the fact they'd gamed it out. They spent the time and effort to come up with something that I think was reasonable. And if I remember correctly, and I may be just misquoting out of nowhere, but there were things like you cannot lock down people, like that does not work. Do not do this. Mm-hmm. And so they threw all that shit out. Partly because there was such an incompetent administration at the time that you had like Jared Kushner doing. And you go, what is this kid doing in any office of any authority at all? Like he's clearly a little tit-suckling buffoon, and yet there he is, just striding the halls of power, making unilateral decisions about all kinds of shit he's completely unqualified to make any decisions about.
He is a smart guy, and he worked a lot of the Middle East conflict stuff that was on a track for something that we don't have today. But again, I hear what you're saying. His background is not like
anybody can fumble through shit.
Yeah.
But to give him that, I mean, all of it was so irresponsible. And so it was this grossly mismanaged pandemic response, and partly for political reasons, And Professor St. Onge, in his little talk today, or the interview I saw today, he pointed out, because he was talking on the TFTC podcast, and Marty Bent asked him, like, well, what do you think about Trump endorsing Bitcoin and all this stuff? And Peter St. Onge said, well, I don't think Trump understands any of this shit at all. He is super loyal to his people. Yeah. And he looks around and he goes, if this is something a farmer in Indiana wants, if this is something a soldier would like, if this is something a cop would like, if this is something a firefighter would like, if this is something a coal miner would like, I'm on board with it. Yeah, and I'll defend it loyally to the death.
And as a capitalist, he can look at competition being good for money itself in a way. So like not judging crypto or anything, but just saying, hey, let the market dictate what works here. Kind of like Millet. Oh, yeah. President Millet? Javier Millet. He was saying that, money itself needs competition or market forces involved, not just central banking dictates. So
yeah. Well, we've already tried that experiment too. I mean, like, that's the funny thing about this is when people start bandying this stuff around, they act like it's never been tried before. Hey, I've got this great new idea, and they remind me of people that, like the meme, hey, I just learned about Bitcoin. Here's some ideas. I'm here to fix it, right? And that's the same thing with like the libertarians, the Democrats, the Republicans. They all come along and they go, hey, I just learned about all these new things in economics, political science, political economy, military strategics. I'm here to fix it. And they just leave out, like, just hundreds of, if not thousands of years of history where people have already done all of this shit. There's nothing new under the sun in our quote-unquote capitalist society. It's, right, and they end up with the same results over and over and over again. We need to go back to free banking. Well, Lynn Alden just pointed out in her book, the track record on free banking is mixed. And in the United States, it was a fucking catastrophe. I mean, it was just absolute dog shit. And it was one of the most unstable periods in United States history because there was no central bank. So it was all, I mean, it was just, you had bank runs all the time. You had banks collapsing all the time. You had people getting rug pulled all the time. It was basically like, it was the equivalent of, we need a free market in money. They gave it to you, and it sucked. It was just a real pain in the ass to do business. So,
and I can see hucksters saying, hey, I got this new idea. I got this new blockchain. I got this other stuff. And not knowing any better and feeling like, well, we need a fix. People will glom onto new ideas like that when categorically from first principles you can just say all of that is also shit.
Yeah, it's all
versus what we know about Bitcoin. If we got on more of a Bitcoin trajectory,
right.
And the realignment happening, Bitcoin will fix this. All these new ideas are easy headlines and, hey, no, I got a new idea. Yeah. No, let's just do this thing. And
right.
people are like, oh, yeah, I like new stuff.
Right.
And they go with that, and it's crap.
Well, that, I just wrote a thing in this latest part of my book I'm working on where I said, people talk about let the market decide, which is great, except the market has no filter for bullshit. Like, if you have an unfettered capitalistic market, crypto should be your number one priority because that is unfettered capitalism. Right
sure.
There.
You got lobbyists and promoters and the sales.
They can just say any goddamn thing they want to get you to buy.
And that's how the sausage is made through that process.
That's free market.
Yeah.
Right? I want unrestricted access. Let the people decide. The people have chosen. About half the people that dabble in digital currencies and whatnot, half get on board and go, Bitcoin only. This is great. The other half are saying Bitcoin's old and it's dinosaur tech and Solana's the next big thing. Dogecoin, meme coins, this. And they will ape into every stupid fucking idea that you can imagine. There were people legitimately going, I can earn 20% yield on Terra Luna forever. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take out loans to put money in Terra Luna. And you can just fundamentally look at that without knowing anything else and go, that can't work.
Yeah.
I actually said out loud, I wrote in an article, this can't work. It's impossible. And people were calling me all kinds of names. Idiot, troll, how'd you ever get a law degree, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, you think what you want, dude, but here's the math. That doesn't work, period.
Yeah. Well, just this morning, I think, so Scott Adams, he, wrote Dilbert, and he's got a podcast. Man, that guy's,
he's a funny
he
dude.
Is prolific. I mean, he gets up every morning and does these live things, and he's been doing it for years.
Yeah. Coffee with Scott Adams.
Coffee with Scott Adams. Smart guy. He really is smart. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with him all the time, but he has some interesting ideas.
Yeah.
And he had this idea, it's like, we have this whole national debt and all these trillions of dollars. It's like, why don't we just make a new blockchain with a token that's pegged to the dollar and just pay off our entire national debt and put it all on this blockchain? And then so we've on paper, we've paid off the debt, and now there's this blockchain that people can, so I see it as like a bond or something, but like the people can buy or sell off of, but it's separated away.
No.
And it seems like sort of this quick fix for this side of the budget line item stuff, and we just put it on this blockchain for this other market to sort of grapple with or deal with and separate it. Like it's like a one-time shot, do this once. Again, it's like who wants that?
Nobody.
Who's buying these U.S. treasuries over there?
Nobody.
It's a shit coin. It's
right.
It's not even a shit coin. It's like this toxic radiological
dump site. Yeah. Well, but it gets even worse because for someone like Scott Adams, he can look at it and go, hey, you got an economy, huh? I just learned about it. I'm here to fix it. And if you paid off all the debt tomorrow, if everybody paid off all debts, all the corporations, all the banks, all the hedge funds, if everybody paid off all their debt, there is no money. All the money is gone because the money is issued through debt. You cannot pay off all the debt or you don't have any money. So there's no more liquidity. So it functionally, that's the way the system is designed, so you can never, ever, ever pay off the debt. The original debt to King William of Orange to fund the Bank of England has still not been paid back. And that was 16, whatever it was, like, because they can't pay it back. There's no money.
Some banker somewhere has it on a ledger, like,
yeah, King William of Orange still owes us money.
Unbelievable. And that's another thing. You've got a gambling addict. So you've got a house of gambling addicts that have been running their own casino and do all that. And now they've got problems, and they're like, oh, man, this gambling's getting hard. We can't run this gambling business. And you pay them off. Does that fix their problem? No.
Right.
Gamble. Oh,
right.
my God, we're free and clear. Let's gamble some more.
I got plenty in the bank now. Woohoo!
Let's print some more money. So, no, it's not a fix. When I look at the debates, what I see is, for me, when I talk about the big game. Hey, did you see the big game?
Right.
It's like we're in the stadium, we're watching them punt the football back and forth, and for me, I watch it because it's the Super Bowl. Sure, I'll watch it, and at some level, it's like, do I give a shit?
Right.
Does it matter if one team or the other wins when the stadium is crumbling?
Nope.
No. So I'll think in my head, it's like my Bitcoin escape hatch, the opt out is like, I don't have to stay stuck in the seat eating the food that the vendor walks up and down offering. Right. I can walk out of this stadium.
Yeah. Despite
everything about the big game is on, the stadium is reality. This is how we run our country, is in the stadium. You got in, but you don't leave the stadium. You're watching the game. The game is the only show in town.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't follow. I don't have a team. I don't watch the games.
Right.
I'll watch the Super Bowl as sort of a little footnote and sort of momentary history.
Right.
But I'm leaving the stadium.
Yeah.
I'm walking out.
Well, I'm watching from the parking lot. I'm not,
I'm going to go sit in the park and have a picnic with my family.
Yeah. I'm going to tailgate, drink some beer, and watch these guys watch all the people cheer and boo and do all the shit they do, and buy all the stadium T-shirts and the pennants. And meanwhile, I'm going to be barbecuing in the parking lot. Yeah. I mean,
my mindset is detached from the big game.
Well, I that's why I love Saylor. Did you see Did you see Robin's interview with Michael Saylor?
Yeah.
Did you see the more recent one with Efrat Fenigson or something
No.
like that? Well, she also did an interview with Saylor at BTC Prague. And so they're kind of back to back on each other, and each one of them managed to tease out these like really cool little unique insights that other people haven't, because like we were talking about before we started the damn camera rolling. Like, Saylor's got his message, that he's rehearsed, but it comes from presenting his ideas, right? Like, it's not rehearsed in the, politicians the way they rehearse, where they have talking points. Mm-hmm. He has a rehearsal of just presenting an idea and refining that idea and refining the presentation and then presenting it a different way. And it's more like sales and marketing for Bitcoin, for his company, for, how this helps everything. So I think it's a great message, right? Mm-hmm. And the way he frames stuff, like in Robin's interview, and the way he frames stuff in Efrat's interview, I realized sort of when I was writing my book, all I'm really doing is just promoting the Saylorian view of Bitcoin just from a very different perspective, right? It's not about corporate treasury, but my message is exactly the same. I'm 100% aligned with what he says, because he is not going smash the state, get rid of the Fed, this, that, and the other thing. He's saying, look, there are these institutions for a reason, and we don't necessarily want to just get rid of them because it makes life really, really hard. And you can also fix them slowly over time by introducing this new monetary unit that you can hold, this reserve asset, this reserve property, this reserve capital, which is now his sort of latest incantation of it. It's not perfect money, it's not perfect property, it's capital. And in the purest sense of the word, it is.
Yeah.
It is digital, distributed, fungible, bearer capital that you can transport anywhere at the speed of light. And it's huge, and it changes so many things on such a profound level that, which is why I'm always sort of positive, despite all the, watching two boomers argue about their golf scores, while one of them is crapping in his Depends, and the other one is, defending his lawsuits and trying to stay out of jail. I'm watching this going, kind of none of this shit matters. Like, once more and more people come on board, and Prof. St. Onge made a good point today. He said there's a tipping point. And if you're a corporate CEO, you have to be conservative, right? You can't be the first kid out on the block to try a new thing, because if it blows up in your face, you lose your cushy CEO job. And nobody wants to do that. But sooner or later, that risk calculus shifts where they go, oh, it's more risky to not have Bitcoin. And once you hit that little tipping point, and it's coming soon, because people say, oh, it'll be 20 years, 30 years. And I'm thinking to myself, I think it can be 5 years. I think it can be 2 years.
Year by year, it becomes harder to ignore.
Year by year, it becomes an impossible calculus to ignore. You cannot. If you're the guy who's sitting there as a CEO and all your shareholders going, why didn't you buy Bitcoin? You're screwed. Then you lose your cushy CEO job. Then you lose your access to your jets and your little girlfriends in Milan and whatever it is you're doing with all your corporate money. And they don't want to give that up. It's a cool life. It's an awesome life to be an executive at a Fortune 500 company. Like, you walk around, you wear nice suits, you have people deferring to you all the time, and you get all the perks and all the luxuries and everything amazing that life has to offer.
I wouldn't know. I can imagine.
Well, yeah. And but you wouldn't give it up, right?
No.
So once that calculus shifts to, like, we need to have Bitcoin, and I think that happens way faster than people are going to anticipate.
Yeah. I think it'll shift hard and quick.
Yeah.
When I think about the big game, and my mindset goes in a couple of directions. One is the great realignment, where all of this is going to adjust and fix itself, and it has to be responsive, like you said, not ignoring reality, and the people are going to demand it. On another level, I imagine it from the cynical sort of conspiracy view I have on it, where the old school legacy powers in charge, the powers that shouldn't be, have tracked this out, are looking at the territory, going ahead, holding on to their power. How do you do that? Well, you've played psyops and operations forever. That's your whole game, is the narrative story and how you get into the next war or the next operation, and making that work and selling it to the public. So from that standpoint, I look at it as like, systems collapsing. They know it's going to collapse. It's a matter of timing. How do we play that? Here's my thought is, plans on the shelf, like, oh, hey, we need this calamity. Let's use this one. Or we need a couple. Let's take these ones off. Economic collapse. The grid goes down. A terrorist attack. Use your imagination. They have they have calamities sort of ready to respond to, and not letting them not be taken advantage of when they occur or when they're provided.
Right.
So the other part of the opposed to the Bitcoin sort of slowly fixing everything is the powers that be saying, in order to get to our next step and what we got to do apparently anyway, and to stay in power, is we need that next Pearl Harbor, like we had with 9/11, like we had with whatever else we made up and stuff. And so what is that? Okay, they're running to lose. Trump gets elected. He's holding the bag. They can easily pull the plug, blame it on Trump. We got this calamity. Usher in the plan they have already written down and planned for. That's kind of an easy route. The other route is that somehow the Democrats pull it out, and overtly they want to maintain that control state narrative, the establishment. What they need then really is some external calamity, a threat, the fear, a problem for us to submit to and rally around and go with, whatever that would be.
Potentially.
That's where I go with it is, the great alignment's happening, but they're going to play a game. They're going to pull a string. There's going to be a crisis, what's the next big global crisis? We all have to I don't know. I mean, it's hard, but we got to do what we got to do.
Maybe. I can see where, I think a lot of people go down that path, right? I think most Bitcoiners are sort of planning for the great collapse. And they go, and they're thinking to themselves, hey, I get to be one of the people that rebuilds from the ashes. And I'm going to be the forefront of the great revolution after the great collapse. And I think that's a common thing. And historically speaking, the doomers are always wrong. Like almost always. Like the people that are planning for the worst possible catastrophe and calamities and all that kind of stuff inevitably end up wrong because chaos is such an intolerable condition for most people. Like most people just cannot tolerate sustained chaos for a long, long period of time. And so you may run into things like that last a few years on a global scale. Like on a micro scale, like in particular nations, those catastrophic chaos states can last for decades, generations. Like look at North Korea. They're nuclear armed. That's the only reason they get to keep that chaos state going for as long as they have. But absent their possession of nuclear weapons, that whole thing would have collapsed a long, long, long time ago, right? Mm-hmm. And right now, like if you look at China, China's got this really great propaganda machine flowing where they say, look how advanced we are, look at all our amazing trains, and look at, and I think Americans genuinely get like anxious about that. Like, oh my God, look at all the progress China's making, and they're the leading manufacturer of XYZ and thing and this and that and the other. And if you actually go look at the reality of China, it's still a dirt poor shithole country. There's just a few cities on the coast where they have like this amazing transformative sort of infrastructure. And yet even with that, you look and you'll see like buildings just kind of fall down or trains that just sort of run off the tracks. But the Chinese government doesn't highlight those things. They just kind of tamp it down, hide it, whatever. But if you get out in rural China, there's still people shitting in holes, and there's still just filth and disgusting lifestyles, and it's gross. And so the idea that this is somehow this economic miracle, their problem is they are trying to control chaos. They are trying to control the weather, and it just doesn't work. And sooner or later, that's going to spiral out of their little fingertips, and it's going to end up in their sort of collapse. And you already saw it. Like, look at China Evergrande. Nobody talks about China Evergrande anymore. That was a catastrophic, stunning collapse of one of the biggest companies in the world. And everyone just went, oh, well, let's just not talk about the fact that one of the largest, real estate companies in the world just collapsed. I mean, went from over $163 a share to 3 cents a share. So when we talk about the way America might unfold through this, I look back and locally for 3 or 4 years during the Civil War, shit got pretty hairy in the cities in some places. If you lived in like California during the Civil War, I don't think you were sitting around going like, oh my God, the Confederate troops are coming. Like it just didn't really affect you that much. If you're in the Montana territories or the Wyoming territories or something like that, it was a thing that was happening.
A lot of wars are isolated to regions and avenues where it's happening, but I mean, a lot of farmers are just still farming.
Right. And a lot of people are just living. Yeah. And a lot of people are just clipping along, doing whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. But that chaos was unsustainable. It didn't last forever. We didn't degrade into like this ongoing, constant civil war, right? Mm-hmm. We came out of it. And we've come out of all kinds of crazy shit, so...
The psyops I always see is the game being, they're always a temporary fix for this now to get to another step. And then maybe it gets backtracked a little bit, but we lose ground. So between various stuff, it's like none of this is like with COVID. Like, didn't pan out, but boy, a lot changed.
Yeah.
That we're still reconciling and grappling with. And so I always see like, okay, the next great calamity, call it what you will. It's a temporary thing that people are going to buy into, temporarily at least.
Maybe. I mean, that's what I'm getting at is like, right now the only thing they wield any control over is censorship and propaganda. Because they've lost every other narrative. They've lost control of the financial system. We are now entering a phase of fiscal dominance. They are now at a place where they structurally cannot cut. They structurally cannot fix the debt problem. They structurally have to print. Like there's just the way this game keeps getting played is they just flood the system with liquidity. So the next crisis and the most likely outcome I see is that they're going to start imposing capital controls. They're going to start increasing reserve requirements on banks. They're going to force banks to hold zero or negative yielding cash reserves just so they can, because that's where they have to park all their excess liquidity and make it look like banks are solvent and things like that. And so the banks are going to revolt because they can't make any money and they're going to go broke. So, what happens in third world economies is they just nationalize the banks. And then they make it so you and I can't take our money out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that also tells you they've lost control of that system. They no longer control the outcomes from that system. And not to keep going back to Peter St. Onge's video, but he said, look, in 2008, they got this really huge false sense of security because they ran into a global calamity that is far bigger than I think most people give it credit for. I don't think people truly understand the depth of that problem. And they fired $100 trillion bazooka at it, and the problem went away. And went, okay, cool. We can do that anytime. Anytime we have a problem, we can just shoot a bazooka at it, and, paper money, and that'll fix it. And so when COVID came along, instead of thinking through it, they had this idea in their heads like, hey, we can just fire up the bazookas and start shooting dollars at this thing, and it'll fix it. The difference between then and now is where that bazooka landed, where those bazooka rounds landed, didn't structurally affect our day-to-day inflation. They just recapitalized banks. So the banks weren't spending that money. They weren't circulating around in the economy, but they were doing things like buying stocks. So you ended up with the stock market that's ripping, but everyone else is getting a little bit poorer slowly. When they bazookaed COVID, they bazookaed into your pocket, my pocket, small businesses, and that structurally affected everything. And because it had to be so massive, and because they were so lulled into security by their last intervention, now they've created this thing that they can't get out of anymore. So they're so limited, and you can see it in their media narrative right now. Inflation is a myth. Paul Krugman is up there spouting some bullshit about, like, if you take away the entirety of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's no inflation.
Sure.
And that's the useful idiot of the week is that guy, and people like him. But the next calamity, I don't even think they have the wherewithal to try and push towards that, because there's always an opposing force that doesn't want that calamity. They want a different calamity, and there's about 1,000 forces that want 1,000 different calamities, and the whole thing just sort of keeps wobbling along down the trail because no one has enough authority to make any of those things happen. So it's just the thing that hits them in the face that they all scramble around and then try and get political and capital gain out of. But in this case, when they try and fire that bazooka, it's not going to work. So we end up in a situation where the bazooka gets fired, and anybody with half a brain in their head is going to put their bazooka, rounds into Bitcoin because it doesn't make any sense to do anything else.
I imagine a scenario where the system's like, man, what would fix this is some more bazooka rounds. Well, we can't just do that without a reason. So we need another good reason, and that's where the reason occurs.
Well, it's reason enough that they go, hey, the banking system's about to collapse again. That's reason. That's all. That was the only reason in 2008. Our entire global financial system is about to collapse. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have to manufacture anything. All they had to do was just keep doing what they've been doing, and they just shot themselves in the foot anyway. Like by 2002, Warren Buffett was telling people, your derivatives market is a financial nuclear bomb waiting to go off. And Alan Greenspan and the Fed chairs and Ben Bernanke and all these clowns were just, it's fine, risk is mitigated, yada, 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 yada. No idea, no clue, and we're just full steam ahead, despite the notional value of those derivatives ballooning to over $600 trillion. 10 times the entire global output. This is fine. Nothing wrong here, nothing to see. And then one little pin came out of it, and everyone went, you mean it all falls down? Mm-hmm. Like every penny of it goes down to zero. And then they shit their pants, and then they just started shooting the bazooka. Because that's all they know how to do. They have no predictive capacity. They have no ability to see beyond that administration that they're in. And they just try and, and now that it's a cash grab and everybody is aware, it's a cash grab. You got to get as close to the money printer as possible and make it so they have to give you that money off that printer first. That's the game. That's the only game we're playing. That's the chapter I'm writing right now. And once you understand that, then the calamities and all this sort of stuff just sort of take a back seat. Because the overriding thing is keep the game going as long as possible. Let's keep Monopoly going. It doesn't matter how many reams of paper we have to pull out of the closet and put Monopoly money figures on it. Just keep the game going. Just keep the game going. Just keep the game going.
Well, I wish the political narrative talked about the money. because it seems so apparent to me, and it's getting so bad and so old at this point. And yet, yes, there's a border crisis. There's an opiate crisis where inflation's happening, and they're not talking about the money.
Right. Well, those are all symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're symptoms of the money.
Selling on this, the fix to the symptoms and not the core root of the problems.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's where I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Living in the state I do, it doesn't even matter if I vote or not. States are going the way they're going when they look at the political map. Okay, we're going to look at Ohio and Arizona, and we're going to look at these few states that really matter at this point. Right. And all I'm just like, what is how disenfranchising does this feel to matter that I vote at all?
Yeah, it's pointless.
So then, for me, knowing that, I can get black-pilled. I'm just black-pilled on politics, which is wrapped in a white pill with Bitcoin. That yes, there's this black pill, but I have this hope that the fix is in and it's coming. So I have a white pill in my pocket, but I'm black-pilled on politics. So then when Kennedy has his talks and stuff, and I know he's got good ideas and alternative views. Mm-hmm. Does it even matter? Does it matter that?
Well, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, it matters because what if you're wrong? That's the ultimate thing. What if you're wrong about everything collapsing? Because I've been predicting all this shit's going to collapse for the last 20 years. I've been wrong for the last 20 years. Like back in the 90s, I was saying, we can't sustain this debt. Ross Perot was up on TV talking about, we are $4 trillion in debt. We cannot afford this. This is not sustainable. The world's going to end. We're all going to die. Everything's going to fall apart. Can't keep this can going. Today it's like 40 trillion. Mm-hmm. So I can choose to keep doing that routine and going, any day now, I can Peter ship it and go, any day now, the whole world's going to melt down. Any day now, any day now, any day now. And sooner or later I'll be right, but you can lose an entire lifetime trying to prove that you're right. Like there were libertarians back in the 70s predicting the collapse of America during the 70s because inflation was so rampant and out of control. They just came off the gold standard, yada, 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 yada. Any day now, the U.S. government's going to collapse. The dollar's going to go into free fall. The world's over. Look at New York. It's crumbling and this and that. The whole world's ending. And then they patched over it somehow.
So the debt could go to 400 trillion and it would still be just the same story. Just ridiculous numbers. Nobody can get their mind around, and yet we still just do what we're doing.
Well, but that's the point. Is like if you go, they might keep kicking this can for another 3 decades. We don't know how much further they can kick the can, because right now we're not Weimar Germany. We're not one country amongst many where all the other countries are relatively stable and we are hyperinflating. The whole world is hyperinflating together, and we are hyperinflating slower than most, which is the creepiest thing about this. So we are actually the financial center of the world still, in that we are still not facing the same sort of inflationary pressures as every other country on planet Earth. So given that, if they figure out a way to keep kicking the can, do you want some buffoon in the office, or do you want some guy who's at least maintaining our reputation abroad? Because we're going to need some global cooperation with some of this shit. We also want someone who is ideally focused on the idea, not that they'll ever execute it, but the idea of things like shrinking our military, shrinking our budget, reducing regulatory burdens, and all that sort of stuff.
Not getting into wars.
And so there's one candidate that was excluded from the stage that potentially represents that. And he's going to be a disaster too, with 100% guarantee. There's no person can take that office and walk out of it unscathed. I think probably the best president we ever had was Calvin Coolidge, because he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even talk. There's a great quote about that guy. Some lady sat down next to him at dinner and said, I bet my husband $5 that I can get you to say more than 3 words. And he looked at her and went, you lose.
Yeah, maybe that's the best we could hope for.
Someone keeps his mouth shut and doesn't tinker.
The kicking of the can down the road is austerity for the rest of us. Just sort of creeping, like, trying to get by with less and less.
Not with Bitcoin on the books.
But not with Bitcoin.
See, that's the point. You kick the can and you've got capital. And if you got secure capital and kicking the can, you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and presuming with the Great Realignment that people who know better are getting into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is getting integrated into money that works because various corporate or even governmental powers that be recognize that and adopt it.
Right.
Now, meanwhile, the price is trying to stay above 60,000. And so when we talked about it last week a little bit about, who in the heck is selling Bitcoin then, and why hasn't some more adoption really happened? And I had to look up. Swan has a really good signal on this stuff, and I had to write some stuff down because I couldn't remember it. Sort of like just why is the price going down? Who in the
more
heck?
people are selling than buying.
So more people are selling Bitcoin than buying. So at a macro level, the fear and greed index is like at 40, and there's just sort of a lot of general kind of fear out there. I think the fear and greed thing is superficial in a way because it's a crypto,
creation.
A creation. Yeah. It's a crypto thing, but yeah, okay. So fear is higher. There are more long-term holders of Bitcoin selling. So like Bitcoin that hasn't moved in a year used to be about 70%. It's gone down to like 65. So there's people that have held Bitcoin for a while that have started to sell. Mm-hmm. Just various people like you and me and others. Okay, you're selling some Bitcoin. You need the cash. Miners are selling, like you said. So like we had the halving. Miners are getting less up front. Meanwhile, a lot of those miners are growing and building infrastructure and have long-term plans, but they need capital to do that. Correct. So they're selling Bitcoin, and they're sitting on a lot, but they're selling Bitcoin. There's the whole Mt. Gox settlement, Mt. Gox, Bitcoin that was like locked up, and people that were holding out and stuck with that for a long time, like that's getting released, and there's some sales out of that. And then believe it or not, nations that I saw a funny thing where, nations that steal Bitcoin or seize Bitcoin, and then they up and sell it because they're in this fiat world. Germany is in the process of selling like 50,000 Bitcoin from some big seizure. Right. So criminal enterprises that are using Bitcoin, or maybe others that nations seize. Nations seize it. The U.S. itself, they've seized Bitcoin, and then they will sell it. Mm-hmm. So nation states get it, and then they, instead of holding it or making plans around Bitcoin at all, that I'm aware of, they sell it and right. Just do their own thing. So
that's more people are selling than buying. I mean,
so
it's the easiest economics lesson in the world.
Yeah.
Are there more people buying than selling? Yeah, price goes up. Are there more people selling than buying? Yeah, price goes down. Like that's just that dynamic of supply.
And right now, those pressures are outweighing longer-term pressures that won't go away. I think where individuals, corporations, nations get into Bitcoin more, and there's a tide coming in, right? And meanwhile, the tide comes in, and temporary players are cashing out because they're still in the old world.
Right. Well, there's always going to be temporary players, and there's always a price where someone's going to sell their Bitcoin. And with, like you said, that coming austerity from them kicking the can down the road, when I say, I'm not worried about that, inevitably the first, question, critique, whatever it goes, oh, okay, so just Bitcoin people get to be rich and everyone else gets poorer and poorer and poorer. And I always say, no, that is not what happens. What happens is fewer and fewer people, especially large corporations, the people that actually make decisions about the things you buy, how they get made, how they get distributed, suddenly don't have the same pressures to inflate their shit the same way that they did before. So even if you're not on Bitcoin, even if you don't care about Bitcoin, even if you think it's magic internet money and you think it's the biggest scam ever, things for you get better gradually anyway because all the big players. So that austerity that has to happen because we're inflating money so much and only the Bitcoin holders are going to be safe from it, I think is a mistake. I think it's the people, everybody benefits from more and more people adopting Bitcoin. And it's not just small holders like me and you. Small holders like me and you benefit enormously by being small holders. If we have a spendable, unspent transaction output that's not fractured into 100 Satoshis each or something. We have a nice big fat chunk of Bitcoin just sitting there. when that corporate adoption, when that hedge fund adoption, when that nation state adoption, when that central banking adoption, when the general banking adoption happens, people like us are going to benefit massively because we're so early and we're so willing to endure the volatility and the quote unquote risk. We as a select group of people get to go, yay, life's pretty good for me. Everybody else downstream from us also benefits because all their shit gets cheaper. There's less monetary premium on things that they need. They get better quality stuff because there's more competition for higher quality. They get better quality, cheaper stuff. And then Jeff Booth's idea, the nominal cost of production continues to decline for them. And it can continue to decline for them because all these corporations, instead of chasing inflation, they are now hedging their inflation with Bitcoin on their treasury. So everybody benefits across the board, around the globe. Even if they don't hold Bitcoin, even if they don't have Bitcoin, they can still use their pesos or their dinars or their yuan or whatever it is. They can still do their little transactions. They can still get their chickens. They can still get their eggs, their milk, whatever. It just costs less and it's higher quality.
I just imagine where, all the small-time Bitcoin holders and very, people like you and me, we have our little chunk of Bitcoin, if you imagine, and you hold that, you keep that. That's your safe nest egg, and it's solid. Meanwhile, in your separate life, where you're getting paid in fiat and buying a lot of stuff in fiat, that is becoming austere. That's getting harder or skinnier.
Well, that's what I just said. So all that stuff doesn't get more austere because if Unilever is holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet, right now Unilever has to increase production, decrease costs by reducing quality and centralizing operations, right? That's the only way they can keep ahead of inflation. Mm-hmm. If they are suddenly holding Bitcoin as a treasury reserve, they don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because every little shred of profit they do is growing faster than inflation.
Yeah.
So they can then start competing on price and quality, and they can start dropping those prices rather than continually raising those prices.
Yeah, so for a while here, until we get there, I see this slide on one hand, even as our Bitcoin is good, but it'll come around. It's just holding out through this kind of hard time.
Well, for us, it's sort of a non-issue, right? Like, if you have a job and you're still able to pay your bills, it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, it might get a little more expensive. Yeah, inflation might continue to hit people.
You can buy less Bitcoin, but
for holders like you and me, I think we already have so much Bitcoin in the grand scheme of things. I think people grossly underestimate what that exponential growth curve is going to look like. Mm-hmm. And when the corporations come on and start buying Bitcoin en masse, and when everybody is holding this as a capital reserve asset, because that's the only sensible thing to do, and the nominal cost of Bitcoin goes so high that it's competing with inflation, where it makes more sense to hold that than holding real estate or holding stocks or holding all that monetary premium gets absorbed into Bitcoin, 100%, which makes everything cheaper for everybody else. It makes it possible for the cost of goods to go to the nominal cost of production.
Yeah. How long that takes for this alignment, I wonder sometimes. In my mind, it's like it should be happening right now, quickly, but it also could be 30 years.
I don't think it'll be 30, but I think it's probably closer to 5 or 10. I really do. I think 10 years from now, I genuinely believe that 10 years from now, people are going to look back on this time and go, wow, what a little period of madness we had. Because right now, everything is just awesome. Things are going exactly the way we've always wanted life on Earth to be. Abundance and no scarcity for anybody. Mm-hmm. Because that's what technology does. That's Jeff Booth's entire point. Technology drives the nominal cost of production to zero. Always. The only thing that keeps the prices high is fiat inflation. Mm-hmm. If you have something that can shunt fiat inflation into Bitcoin rather than trying to artificially prop up the nominal cost of production, then, or at least the prices you charge, despite the nominal cost of production declining, then you end up in that perfect storm, the perfect positive storm, that lifts all boats all at once.
Mm-hmm. And I could see that just sort of the crescendo is going to hit, and it's just going to change quickly. And I'm just thinking, man, I my own impatience is I want this to be happening, and it will. I just want it to be faster. For all of us, just for our benefit.
Me too. I would love to see that.
I go to this family reunion yesterday. Drove up to Wenatchee and back, and saw a whole bunch of family I hadn't seen in a long time. And it's funny because I knew it years ago. A number of my second cousins, my my parents' cousins who had their kids, and we've known each other for a long time, and I hadn't seen them in a while. A bunch of those cousins that I've known as a kid got into finance. Actually, one of my cousins lived in Prague for a number of years, lived in London for a number of years. He now lives in the States, but he's been in finance for years. And I bring up Bitcoin. And he's not anti-Bitcoin. It's just not the paradigm that he's ever really operated within his career.
Right.
And so he's open-minded about it. He's like, oh, that's interesting. I can tell he's not educated up on it. But what they're working on is new, interesting technologies to help small folks manage money and property and do, say, like you're doing Airbnbs, and there's regulations around that and how you report things or run a business and report taxes and all this stuff. And they're making systems that allow small individuals to do that well without relying on a property manager or a company. They can do it themselves. It's like, that's cool. I like that. But they're not into Bitcoin. It's all fiat. It's all in the fiat, and it's also property management type world. And so all that rent-seeking realm, which for people is profitable and is big.
Was.
You think it's slowing down?
I think it's self-evident.
Like Airbnb, right now. So when my wife and I travel anymore, as opposed to any hotel, man, we always look for an Airbnb. It's like cooler. It's better.
Well, that's an N of one, right?
Yeah.
Well, just look at commercial real estate. Look at how many banks are upside down. There's 563 distressed banks because of commercial real estate loans that are no good. Look at all the properties for sale in West Palm Beach that are all Airbnbs. Look at all the places. Look at Austin, Texas. That market's collapsing. All the Airbnbs. All that stuff, like...
You think it's slowing down, shrinking down?
It's unsustainable. We can't... There's zero possibility that sustains. Is because it can't. Like, that's the whole point of a monetary premium. That's the whole myth of real estate is a good investment because it's absorbed monetary premium this whole time. Pretty soon, it's going to come to a spot where why would you own a home that you don't need and take all that risk when you can just own Bitcoin? It doesn't make any sense. You'd have to be a buffoon right now to go start up an Airbnb business when there's Bitcoin just sitting there waiting for you. Like, it would be cartoonishly stupid.
So I can start to describe that to my second cousin who's hustling hard in a startup to create systems for the Airbnb environment. And it sounds potentially very lucrative. But bridging that gap, like for me to tell him that, it'd be almost kind of offensive to him, I think. It'd be like...
I know. Well, it doesn't matter. You could have gone to any guy that was selling mortgage securities in 2007 and said, you realize this is all going to come to an end. I understand last year you made $1.2 million hustling shitty mortgages to people with zero paperwork mortgages. I know it's a great business. I know you're telling me I should probably get into the mortgage business because, man, I'm just making money like crazy. This is such a great idea. Always going to be there. And you could have told him then with a very straight face and go, this is all going to collapse in a year. You are going to be selling vacuum cleaners door to door next year because this whole thing is going to come crashing down around your head. That's bullshit. Man. Real estate always goes, and they would have told you all the reasons why all their fiat bullshit is a good idea and why you're a moron and why you're an idiot. Just like your cousin right now, if you said, your little Airbnb thing is going to collapse. Like, that's not going to last. You might squeeze some money out of it in the short term. Sooner or later, that whole house of cards comes down on your head, and you will have invested a lot of time, effort, and money into a thing you thought was going to make you rich and is going to get you wrecked. And he's going to look at you and go, you're a moron, what do you know? I've been doing this a long time, yada, 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 yada. There's not much you can do for people that are embroiled in a world that is dying.
For someone who's working in a complex area of systems and regulations and monies and building software around that, the answer of Bitcoin is like too simple.
I know.
There's not enough to do.
That's Michael Saylor literally just said those same words.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for people to do is the simple thing.
Yeah, they need a whole puzzle to sort out because that's their world. That's how they keep busy. That's how they make their what they make their work of, and it's this complexity and this specialty expertise. Right. Bitcoin is too simple, too easy, and if all they do is like this whole team of people's their whole job now is like, well, really we need like a person just to track and hold and make sure as secure as our Bitcoin, right? And that's it. Yeah. Well, but what about So what do all these other people do?
They lose their shitty bullshit jobs that nobody needs them to be doing.
Well, that's not good for the economy. The realignment in those areas are hard.
Well, that's a fake economy. Like, that's never been a real economy. That economy does not exist on a gold standard. How many Airbnbs or how many rental houses were there under the gold standard? 0. Like, nobody did it because it didn't make any sense. It's cheaper to just go buy a house. Why is there suddenly a market for rental houses? Why is there suddenly a market for houses as investments? Because of fiat, 100%. You can just look, you see number of rental houses in America. 1971? Mm-hmm. Just like that. So just because people have built a business on a shitty idea doesn't mean it's a good idea for a business.
The unwinding of that, I see it being really weird and hard for a lot of people. They're not going to be able to mentally make that transition, and then it's like, well, what's my identity? What am I doing? There's nothing to do other than like watch my Bitcoin.
That again, I think that's a fundamental error. Like, that goes back to this idea that the only reason people have a purpose is to be a fiat slave somewhere, and absent being a fiat slave, they just melt down and die. I don't think people are just wired that way. I think people are far more creative. Like, when Europe was leveled to dust and rubble, people didn't just go, well, I don't have a job anymore, I guess I just can't do anything. Like, they didn't just give up. They started building shit. They started rebuilding shit. They started doing things. Yep. They made themselves useful. And I think for all the people doing bullshit, soul-sucking, soul-crushing jobs, like sitting in an office pushing emails around, trying to hustle Airbnb fucking software, or whatever the fuck it is your cousin's coming up with, I don't fear for them at all. And especially because if they go, oh my God, I'm out of a job, I can't do this, I can't do that, but hey, groceries are 1/10 what they cost last year. Oh, well, at least it's not hard to buy some food, so they can keep feeding themselves, doing some potentially useful activity, like maybe digging a ditch or putting in a fence or fixing somebody's car or something like that, like, until they figure out something that's actually useful to the economy.
It may be that, like, meat space progress and activity, just humans needing to be busy and be productive and do something. Maybe we just rebuild grassroots, ground up infrastructure, livelihoods.
Correct.
We just invest in life and build stuff.
Correct. I think so. Yeah. Because right now, there is no need for that guy to exist. 0. If he disappeared tomorrow, the effect on the economy is 0. Somebody somewhere can't more efficiently manage their Airbnbs that they shouldn't be invested in anyway, because there's such a huge monetary premium on the properties they're invested in. If you take away the inflator, if you said inflation, we are not printing another dollar after tomorrow, the entire Airbnb economy collapses. The entire Uber economy collapses. The entire Uber Eats economy collapses. All these economies that are built on fiat, built on continual debt and inflation, collapse. They just go to 0 overnight.
In the meat space world, though, I can see a market space for the fact that people will travel and not want to necessarily stay in a hotel. Or they might like a house near the beach. Or they might like to have things delivered to them, and that people who do that kind of a service are doing it for people that want it.
0 chance that exists.
At all.
At all. Why would there be? Why would anyone own a house they don't need? Absent monetary premium. If you knew for a fact that your extra house is going to lose money forever, would you go buy an extra house anyway? Go, if I go invest $200,000 in this house, by 20 years from now, I will be able to get $150,000 back. Would you make that investment?
If there was a market for travelers who like to visit places and stay in a house, but they're not going to buy a house every time they travel. There's going to be houses that, people don't live in the houses, but people do travel and visit places and want to stay kind of in a community.
Potentially. How many of those places existed in 1950?
0.
Why?
But society was different. See, people travel a lot now, and
So nobody traveled in 1955?
I think the mindset was just that, well, you go find that hotel. Or the roadside Bates motel was of quality.
Yeah, it was a great deal. It was a really good quality. It was a great experience. You had nice amenities. It wasn't some rundown shithole with a bunch of drug addicts hanging out in the parking lot. Because there was an incentive to create that experience, because they weren't debasing the money at the rate that they're debasing it now. The only reason any of these businesses, quote-unquote, exist is because of the monetary premium that people can capture and the rent-seeking they can capture and the distance between the amount they have to pay to borrow to get the Airbnb and the amount they think they're going to generate by having the Airbnb. But the people that are paying for those Airbnbs are also working fiat jobs that nobody needs them to be doing. 80% of the people employed in America right now are doing things that nobody needs them to do. Mm-hmm. It would not matter one fucking bit if they just stopped doing it tomorrow. How many, like every HR department, what do we need these fucking clowns for?
Because of all the regulations and fairness rules and pay equity things and all the complication to managing people who will sue their employee. No, as employees, they will sue their employer as a retirement plan. That's like the new paradigm.
Right. Well, again, if you just go, well, you just don't have a job, so who are you going to sue now? Dude. Like, we don't need an army of people sending emails and going to useless meetings every day. Like, there's a great book called Bullshit Jobs. I'd recommend anybody watching this read that book. Because our economy is predicated on a fiction, on an ongoing fiction that's been in place since 1971. That money comes from nothing, that you can just take on debt and make money from it forever by holding assets that appreciate from a monetary premium for no reason other than inflation. People that buy stocks, if you look at the actual rate of inflation since 1971, they go, stocks go up every year by on average 10%, so is monetary inflation. So all you're doing is just tracking monetary inflation. In fact, in most cases, you're losing out just a little bit to it. Why? Because of money printing, period. So when people can't print money like that, and that monetary premium, or if they continue to print money like that, and there is something that appreciates far faster than inflation does, like, I don't know, Bitcoin, then pretty soon it doesn't make any sense for BlackRock to buy residential real estate, because they go, we can earn 70% cost-adjusted return on Bitcoin, or we can potentially lose 2 to 3% a year owning residential real estate. How about we dump the residential real estate and put that money into Bitcoin? Because that makes more sense overall, across the board.
When my son and I were traveling across the country a few weeks ago, and it's funny because I was like, I could legitimately sleep in the car or camp at times and stuff. For the sake of my son, I was like, when we need to sleep, we're making some long miles during the day. We need some good sleep, so we're finding kind of the cheapest little hotel and motels along the way. Mm-hmm. And it was hit and miss. Some of them were good and fine. Mm-hmm. There were others, like there was one little Holiday Inn, like a block and a half from the Alamo in San Antonio. And you can tell, okay, dealing with urban problems, and there's people on the streets, and it was midnight, and there was hocus pocus going on around. And I'm like, oh, brother. We pull up to the place, and it's gated, and you got to get the code to get in through the gate in order to park, and you got to wear a tab on your car. They deal with problems. And the Indian guy in the lobby is keeping his business running, but is the suspicious type. Mm-hmm. And it's the gamut of like any pets, any smoking, no visitors, don't want problems. Like, are you problems sort of thing. He probably gets people walking in all the time and wanting a room because it's cheap. And it was, and then we get our room key and all that, and it's a variety of people staying there, largely fine, and other hinkiness. And you open the door, and it's like, what is that smell? Mm-hmm. Like it's musky or musty or something's been going on here. And it was kind of this, the decline of the what would have been, my God, if you want to see the Alamo, this is the location to do it. Yeah. Prime location. Dealing with problems.
Well, what do you think make the experience that bad?
my expectations, perhaps.
You think that's what made that hotel that shitty? Your expectations of the hotel made that hotel shitty?
Well, that's the austerity encroaching. I would say systemically, I look at it as a societal breakdown in a way, which comes from money. But that say you have, at one time, this business was new, clean, legit. Not that they're not legit, just that you didn't deal with the same kinds of problems, human problems. Mm-hmm. So now you go there, and we have a growing set of human problems going on in this area, or motivations in society. Hmm. And so they, as a business, are dealing with this kind of shit that people drag in all the time. Versus back in the good old days, and you think of like in the 50s, and you're traveling on Route 66, and you can just stop anywhere, and it's all good Americana quality.
Well, what was different then than now?
Good money.
Yeah.
Good money.
Well, but that's the point. Is for the hotel guy. Here's the simple answer to the thing I'm trying to convey. Is for him, his costs are continually rising. He pays more in property tax. He pays more in maintenance fees. He pays more in utilities. He pays more in stuff that goes in the hotel, soap, towels, everything. All that stuff is continually rising, right? Mm. And people's ability to pay is continually declining. So his profit margins are always going down. His costs are always going up. So what he's trying to do is chase down. Mm-hmm. His thought process says, if I can just save on expenses, I can make money off the shitty amount of rent that I can charge for my shitty hotel. Not realizing that that's a death spiral where the quality of his hotel continues to go down. So the quality of his guests continue to go down while his expenses continue to rise. And because he's got shittier guests, he has even higher expenses, which is why he's trying to filter you so hard, because he doesn't want any more expenses because he can't tolerate them.
Yeah.
So he's on a continual fiat death spiral.
I walk in, I'm on vacation, I'm excited, we're going to see the Alamo tomorrow, and he's like, no wonder his attitude was so bad. It's like, are you a problem? I'm like, no, but I'm cool. He's like, okay, sign here, initial here. I don't want any problems. Here's all the rules.
Right.
Okay.
well, here's the thought experiment for you. What happens if he had Bitcoin on his balance sheet?
Maybe he could renovate and improve and.
Well, suddenly, instead of his fiat purchasing power going down and down and down, and his costs going up and up and up and up, his purchasing power is going up and up and up faster than his prices are going up. His costs are going up. Mm. So when it comes time to invest in the hotel, he has more capital on the balance sheet than he has liabilities. Mm. So he can afford to improve things, which then turns into a virtuous circle, because then he gets a higher margin because he gets higher quality guests, which then increases his Bitcoin holdings even further, which then makes it easier. He has more capital on his balance sheet than he has liabilities, and his capital keeps rising, and his liabilities are also rising, but much slower than his capital is. So suddenly he gets in a virtuous circle where he can start charging less for the hotel and filtering for even higher quality guests. People will be competing to get into his hotel because it's the nicest hotel near the San Antonio thing. Mm-hmm. And he can afford better security, and he can afford better things, and he can start gradually shunting people out of there, and then his prices that he can charge go up. Then suddenly he is in a great space simply because he's added Bitcoin to his balance sheet. Mm-hmm. So everything in there, despite all the social decay around him, suddenly rises because he is saving in a superior capital allocation strategy. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can see that. One thing that just sort of keeps a steady damper on that progress, in my mind, is selling Bitcoin a taxable event. If people have to think of the tax consequences, there's always in the back of their mind when you hold that, say, rock solid capital. Now, it's incentive not to sell it, which is not a bad mindset to have. No. But if you ever want to sell a little, so say you're growing your Bitcoin more than you're selling, mm-hmm. but you sell some because you've held it there, but you're going to make improvements. Mm-hmm. You kind of don't want to sell it because the government's going to steal their non-deserved share.
Well, the difference in that line of thinking is the idea that you have to somehow sell it. Because if this theoretical, not even theoretical, this actual hotel owner went to a bank and they said, what assets do you have? And he goes, according to the new accounting rules, I can mark to market my Bitcoin. This is how much Bitcoin I have. This is how much capital I have. I need to borrow this much to do improvements on my hotel. Oh, well, your loan is going to be 3%.
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to come up with enough revenue to cover my 3% loan. I can pay for all these improvements. And then my Bitcoin is still growing, still growing, still growing. And then 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever it is, when the loan comes due, he can go back to the bank and say, hey bank, I would like to take out another improvement loan on my hotel. And they go, great. Have you been paying your interest this whole time? Yes, I have, like a dutiful little bean counting bill payer. They go, great. How much capital assets do you have? And he goes, I have $10 billion worth of Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And they go, oh shit, how much do you want to borrow? I just need $300,000 to improve the pool. No problem, buddy. Here you go. We'll charge you 2% for that loan because you're a great customer. He goes, thank you so much. And then rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So the idea that a business owner like that has to sell, like you personally have to sell your Bitcoin if you want to fund capital improvements in your life. If you're a business owner, you do not. And especially if you find a bank that is willing to accept that you have this asset on your balance sheet, which is Bitcoin. There's not many right now, but it's growing daily. So when I talk about the Great Realignment, I'm literally saying nothing different than what Michael Saylor is saying. I'm saying the exact same, like almost identical thing. I'm just coming at it from a very different angle, right? But the ultimate outcome is the same thing. With this capital asset on your balance sheet, regardless if you're a person, a small business, a big business, a mega corporation, or a bank, as the value of that capital asset grows, it outpaces inflation at such a rate that it makes it incomprehensible to hold anything else on your balance sheet. And if you need to lever up your business, your small business, your medium-sized business, your large business, your corporation, or your bank, you can lever against that asset because it's an asset on your books. You go, my business is worth $1 billion. I need to borrow $100 million for improvements. Okay, no problem. So you're scarcely impinging your assets by a $100 million thing on a $1 billion loan, but especially if you're taking a $10 million loan on $1 billion worth of assets. For you and me right now, we can't do that yet. And as these things change, there will come a time when someone like you will be able to go to most banks and say, hey, they'll ask you, what assets do you hold? Because right now, if you go to the bank, what assets do you have? You go, well, my uncle gave me some land in Washington. I got an acre in Washington. It's worth $5,000. Okay, well, I can't really loan you shit against that. But if you go, I have $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Oh, that's a pretty good asset. We're pretty sure we can secure a loan against those assets. So what do you need? I need $25,000 to put a new roof on my house. Okay, great. Here's your interest rate. Here's the thing. It's secured by your Bitcoin or it's secured by your house or however you do it. But when they do the math to say, are you capable of, or is it safe for us to loan you that money? Well, he's got $1 million worth of assets, and he's got a house that's worth $150,000 of equity. Yeah, we can give him a $25,000 loan to we'll put it against his house. So what? But you're in debt on the house anyway. So you're impinging debt with debt, but the rate you're going to get is based on your $1 million of assets, not you've got $150,000 in equity and a $60,000 a year job or $80,000 a year job or whatever it is, $100,000 a year job, right? And I think that day is coming much, much, much faster than anybody can anticipate right now. And when it does come, the nominal value of your Bitcoin is going to skyrocket so hard, so fast, that your head is going to go, woo! And then a lot of these questions won't matter to you anymore.
Now, with that comes responsibility in a sense where you could wreck yourself leveraging off Bitcoin, getting loans that the bank knows, well, push comes to shove, we're going to have you cash out your Bitcoin.
Well, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
That's true. So it's just sort of a mindset to have that you could do all this stuff leveraging your Bitcoin, but then be responsible.
But the point I'm making is not about whether or not a person can do it, because it's sort of irrelevant at the individual level what individuals are doing with their money. What becomes really hyper-relevant for everybody in the world is what happens when Unilever is doing it, what happens when Microsoft is doing it, what happens when Apple is doing it, what happens when Tesla is doing it, what happens with... Because there are 11 companies that control all food production in America right now. If all 11 of those companies are focused on growing their Bitcoin balance sheet, and then simultaneously focused on providing the best possible value to their customers to retain their customers for the hundreds of brands that they have underneath their little 11 umbrellas, then suddenly your life gets a lot better because your food choices get better, because your quality gets better, and your costs come down. Mm-hmm. Not because anything changed in their world, except for their capital is growing faster than their expenses. And their capital is growing faster because they're holding Bitcoin. So you can continue being a little fiat slave. You can not even have any Bitcoin on the balance sheet at all. But next thing you know, when you go to the grocery store, instead of paying $200 to get your Cheerios, you're only paying $100 to get your Cheerios. And then next year, you're only paying $50 to get your Cheerios. And now Cheerios come with a free steak. Every box of Cheerios has a steak attached to it. And then the year after that, it's $25 for the Cheerios. And they give you a free massage every time you buy your box of Cheerios. So you get a steak, a massage, and a box of high-quality Cheerios with, artisan-grown wheat.
What a Bitcoin standard we will have.
Well, that's the beauty of it. Every week I'm giving away the entirety of my book. And this is great because it helps me, filter these thoughts and refine them to a place where hopefully people can understand what the hell I'm trying to say. But the punchline is everybody's life gets better when all the major players in the game that we're playing right now start holding Bitcoin.
I see it. I get it. Makes sense. How is your book going as you write it?
Great. I started writing my new introduction, so I'm about, probably a fourth of the way through the new introduction, the proper introduction, the one that's actually introducing the book. And I'm about maybe a third of the way through part 3, the part on greed. And then I just have part 4, which is on Bitcoin. But most of that is already written. So it's it's slow. It's been a little slower than I anticipated. And that's mostly because of my fiat slave job, I think. Rather than writing every single day, I find myself kind of relegated to writing on the weekends. And but it's coming along. I'm pleased with the progress so far. I kind of wonder how helpful it'll be to people, because I don't know. It's like when I'm talking with you right now, I see that sometimes it's a struggle to get these.
Well, it'll be helpful in that sense that, even for Bitcoin maxis who are in transition at various levels and thinking it all through, there's education to go on for the rest of all of our lifetimes in one sense, because the realignment is not the old paradigm that we're used to. So
right, and that I think that's the fun part of writing the book is it's fun to not only hypothesize about what the world looks like under a Bitcoin standard, because I think even people that are maxis, even the Michael Saylors of the world, and I should take that back, because Michael Saylor, I think it was in his interview with Everett or with Robin, one or the other, he makes the same point that I do, or I make the same point that he does, which is it's really hard to say what this world looks like, but I think it's going to be pretty awesome. And I agree 1,000%. I mean, wholeheartedly to the tips of my toes. I think the world's just going to be really neat. I think it's just going to be this really, really positive time in humanity. And I don't think it's going to look like this necessarily, because none of this really makes sense except in a fiat world.
Sort of like when Robin asked me that question, how is your job affected? What does your life and job look like under a Bitcoin standard? And it's like, I may not have that job. I don't think I'll have that job. Or my job would be so different, I'd be spending different amounts of time doing very different things. Now, the work we have interfaces with people, but over time, I just sort of see a lot of that going away in ways that they don't need as many people like me doing what we're doing now,
right?
Perhaps. So,
well, I mean, just think about a county government. Let's say one of our local counties here had Bitcoin on the balance sheet in a substantial amount. They say, hey, we need to issue a bond, and dear taxpayers, we only need X amount because we're going to back this bond with our Bitcoin holdings or whatever it is. And so it makes it easier to pass the bond measure. But then, go to any meeting, whether it's in parole, probation, or the jail work, anything like that. Go, if I could just throw unlimited money at these problems, we could fix them all. Right? You can't throw unlimited money. especially in government land. But if you have something where your capital ratio keeps going up and you're faster than your expenses are going up, then it makes it easier to pay for things like homeless outreach and fixing drug addiction and fixing housing problems. And because right now it's not that we don't have solutions for all of these problems, there's just no money to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things get better, and like you said, your job, my job, may become irrelevant, because if you fix homelessness and you reduce drug addiction, like chronic drug addiction, down to 3 or 4% of what it is today, like you reduced it 95%, what need is there for people like you and me? Mm-hmm. It shrinks down to this little tiny sliver of the population that is intractable and can't be helped for whatever variety.
And there are
reasons.
people like that there's no amount of fixing that'll fix them at this point.
Right.
I just see that.
So there will be people like you and me, probably far more expert than you and I at dealing with those problems, that will be best situated to help with those problems.
And instead of a caseload of 50 people, maybe you have 5 that
Correct.
you spend all your days really managing, but in a different way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which makes everything better for everybody.
Yep.
So it's all boats slowly get lifted, and I think they're going to get lifted much faster than people think. I mean, the trickle-down effects from like big corporations taking this stuff on, but I can quite literally see massive allocations towards Bitcoin on most major balance sheets. And I mean, balance sheets that are like 100 million plus in assets right now. I can see a lot of those very rapidly shifting to Bitcoin, because once the tipping point is reached, once more than a handful are doing it, once those successes become irrefutable, then you, whether you're a politician, a banker, a CEO, a small business owner, you look at the writing on the wall and you go, if I'm not doing this, I'm going to get crushed. So I have to do it. And then they're going to go like lemmings over the cliff, except it's a cliff that gradually lifts them up into heaven.
It's a rainbow lemming.
Yeah, it's rainbow
escalator.
Lemmings.
Rainbow lemming escalator.
Yes, I love it.
Stairway to heaven. Well, that's awesome. And that reinforces all the hopeful ideas I have. I feel like we're continually sort of on the cusp of that breaking loose, and it's kind of just a matter of like, when does it start to cascade? When does it start to break loose? It takes those cracks and gushing, and then
Those
like,
cracks have
hello,
already formed.
it's there. It's like we're.
Happened.
I know, and so then when you don't see it like reflected in the price, and it's that fiat thinking.
Yeah, that's that fiat thinking.
It's that fiat thinking of like, we're on the cusp, and even as so many things are just it's cracking and gushing all over the place, and yet superficially I say like, when do I see it so obviously that it's like everybody knows it?
I don't know if it'll ever be like a light bulb moment.
It may never be like a thing where everybody starts to like, oh my gosh, we all understand it now. A lot of people may never really understand how or why, but it happened.
I think it's going to go kind of like from the 70s to from 1980 to 1990. I think that's what it's going to feel like. Like, you were around 1980, right? You probably weren't too hip on like the financial situation of the United States and all that kind of stuff. We were in a deep, horrible recession. And by 1990, the world was sort of, my future's so bright, I gotta wear shades, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what happened between that time? They broke out the credit card. They just started spending money on debt. They just started issuing a bunch of debt. But the world got better because, like, everything just got a little bit better. People could afford to go do things. And it was so great all through the 90s. Like, the 90s were just kind of a fun time. Like, it was a period of abundance for a lot of people. Myself, yourself, I think. It was a very abundant time, or at least it felt like it to me. It was a lot easier to get by than it was 20 years earlier in the 1970s, when it looked like the whole world was about to collapse. New York utterly transformed itself. Between 1975 to 1995, night and day difference. Mm-hmm. It went from one of the most dangerous, like, slum, shitty...
Times Square,
Times Square was a great place to get knifed.
Yeah.
Or get your pocket picked, or you could find yourself a sex show or a bunch of hookers somewhere. By 1995, it was freaking Disney World. Mm-hmm. Complete 180. but it was all fiat. It was all debt.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to get that same 10-year, 180-degree turnaround, except this time it's going to be built on a sustainable foundation.
Yeah.
So
one that won't like ride bubbles and collapse and ride
Right.
bubbles and collapse, but more
It
just
just
like this is the way it goes.
The new trajectory now is always up, always better.
Mhm.
Always up, always better. I think that's where it, and it's going to get to some sort of plateau where it's like things are really awesome, and we're just going to kind of coast along there until technology or something else comes along and makes it even more awesome.
Mhm.
That's what I think is going to play out. But anyway,
I agree. We're
good
at
grief.
an hour and
40 minutes.
Good podcast.
Bye.
Good discussion. Let's wrap it up here, folks. We'll do it again next week. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Toodles.
Bye.